Hello. You said that nomads used to follow the plant, that they used to plant, right? So this somehow changes the concept of being nomad. Does this apply like all over the world somehow?
Can you repeat that for me?
Like you said that nomads used
Yeah.
to follow the plants, right?
Yeah.
So this changes somehow the concepts of the nomads.
Yeah.
Does this apply all over the world, like or only in Australia?
I would suggest that traditionally there are two types of nomadic people. There are nomadic people with herds of animals, and there are nomadic people without herds of animals. So Australian Aboriginal people, they did not have their own herds of animals. Nomadic peoples in other places, like in Mongolia, for example, they have their herds of animals, and so their movement is based not so much around food for themselves, but around food for their animals. Which I think changes what they're looking for. So they're looking for grass, but they're also looking for water at specific times of the year. The basic logic is similar though, because even nomadic groups with herds of animals, they will stay in a place for a few days and then they'll move on. Australian Aboriginal people stayed for longer, from what I understand. Nomadic herds will move on faster, and the animals will eat everything around them, and then they'll move a little bit and then start again. And interestingly, people are applying the same logic now in raising cattle and not so much sheep, but pigs as well, where they divide their land into fairly small parts, and the animals are there for 2 days or 3 days, and then they move a little bit. And it's interesting to see how much healthier everything is. Because of nomadic peoples with groups of animals in large parts of the world, nature actually adapts. So nature has adapted to large groups of animals coming and eating everything in a short period of time, and then pooping and leaving, and then coming back 6 months or 9 months later. And nature actually needs that. What we do is we have a piece of land, and we have 2 cows or 4 cows or whatever, and we just leave them there all year, and in the end it just ends up looking miserable. Nature's not designed for that. But around the world, as far as I know, nomadic groups are defined by these two styles. Does that answer your question?
More habitual stuff. My question is, do you believe that thanks to this new information that you showed us today, Australian Aboriginals can be seen in the same light as civilizations such as Egypt? Like the general perception of the public can change from the traditional view that they were simple people to a more advanced civilization, like I said before, like Egypt.
It would be nice to think so, but one thing to keep in mind is that if you have a house like this, it doesn't fall down by itself. So what happened in Australia was you have people like Charles Sturt, the ugly man in the picture. They went and they saw these things. So he was moving around in 1844. By 1860, when people went back to live in these places, the things that he described were not there anymore. Which means that someone went through and very carefully destroyed it. Because it's dangerous to suppose that Australian Aboriginal culture was on a par with Egyptian culture, because, well, the English didn't destroy Egyptian culture. So it's psychologically really difficult to say, well, look, this Australian Aboriginal culture was really complex and really interesting, and, well, we killed them. Because then you have to say, well, why did we do that? And what did we gain from that? What did we gain at their cost? And how do we make it up to them? And they're the questions that very few societies want to think about. So you would think logically, you show the evidence, and people think, oh, but the reality is that it's not that simple. Would be nice. questions?
Ms. Scarlett Leve Torres, the Director of the English Pedagogy of Elementary and High School level, will proceed now to thank Mr. Matt Sinclair with a present for his interesting talk and participation today. Our next presenter is Mr. Francisco Salamanca. Mr. Salamanca holds a diploma in American and British Cultural Studies from his internship in the British Culture and Methodology International House, London, and a diploma in British Cultural Studies from Universidad de Chile. As of today, Mr. Salamanca is currently teaching at IEPS Institute, and he will present the talk called American and British Cultural Studies.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Oh, that was too loud. I think that I'm going to use this one. First of all, I want to thank for this invitation, especially to Gonzalo, that was a former student from high school. So I'm very proud for you, Gonzalo. That's for you for organizing this event. And on the other hand, I want to share some of my insights and some part of my experiences with cultural studies. Even though this presentation is called A Journey Through American and British Cultural Studies, I want to tell you that this is going to be more than a lecture, a presentation, in which I'm going to cover in a brief summary some of the main aspects of British and American cultural studies. To start, I would like to point out that in the late 80s, a new interdisciplinary subject began to appear on the syllabus in a number of different countries. It challenged a fundamental premise of homogeneity, the existence of a single entity that could be controlled by those who decreed what was culture and what was it not. Most of this was based on male, heterosexual, white, and sometimes with moral absolutes, okay? So, when we go to the topic of cultural studies, it's important to emphasize that cultural studies is not the same as culture. Probably most of you were expecting me to talk about high culture, or what is the history of the United States, of the British culture, but not. Actually, even though if they are correlated, cultural studies, the main aspect or the main objective of cultural studies is cultural change, okay? So here we have a quotation that I took from Turner in 1992 that says, "Cultural studies, emerging from the literary critical tradition that saw popular culture as a threat to the moral and cultural standards of modern civilization." So as you can see, here we are starting with the first conflict with popular culture and the moral cultural standards. What were those cultural standards? Okay, so what is culture then? Do you have an idea what is culture? What is culture? Do I have a microphone around there? So would you like any of you share what do you understand by culture, mister? Please.
Culture is usually a preset of customs and idioms within a community.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you, mister. So, as you said, the concept of culture comes from anthropology, by the way. And as you said, that is pretty good. Culture is that complex whole which includes knowledge, beliefs, arts, law, customs, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by a man as a member of society. Even though we have to understand that there are some subcategories, and remembering that culture is learned. Why do we say that culture is learned? Why do you think culture is learned? If we go back in time, perhaps you remember that when you were at high school, And every Monday, the people in the school force us to sing the national anthem. Why do you think? Because that's a signifying practice in order to remember, to help us to remember that we belong to a specific community, that we are Chilean, nationality, and some other stuff related to patriotism. We can also say that culture is transmitted. Why do you think that culture is transmitted? Because from generation to generation, we add new ingredients, but culture is always evolving and changing. We also can say that culture is shared. Probably, as perhaps you don't know, but I come from Los Angeles. Even if you are from Concepcion and I'm from Los Angeles, we share a lot in common because we share the same culture, we share the same values, and some other stuff related to our history too. And as I mentioned earlier, culture is also always changing. And I want to emphasize that there's something that, at least for me, is very interesting and very important. That every time that we talk about culture, sometimes cultural changes, when something is marginalized, then becomes mainstream. And sometimes vice versa. What is mainstream becomes marginalized. So here we have some other concepts. Mr. Sinclair mentioned something earlier about high culture or low culture. But what is the difference? What is high culture for you? What is low culture for you? Do we have other more participants? No, I really appreciate your participation. So if you want to share, please, Mr.
For high culture, I think high culture is usually a system that has proven itself over a long period of time, while low culture is usually more related to smaller environments and that it's more it's seen in a shorter period of time.
Well, you are getting to the point, but the difference between high culture is that, between high culture and low culture is that high culture is what it is institutionalized. So, for example, everything that is related to museum, aristocratic, or people with high social status, the people that attend to theaters, and they are considered to be part of the high culture. So, on the other hand, what is low culture? Low culture is popular culture, the culture that is on the street, the culture that is the guy that is playing music into the bus. That's the popular culture. Pamphlets, fanzines, and so on. Another important thing that I would like to point out that, again, sometimes things that are marginalized become mainstream. For example, if you have the chance to visit one day London, you will see that in London, as well as in Chicago or in New York, there are some specific areas where graffitis, that used to be a counter-hegemonic force, are very popular. Are very popular in the sense that most people that are visitors go up and they want to check for those graffitis, okay? Let's continue. And when we go back in time, when we were talking about cultural studies, Richard Hogarth and Stuart Hall, who were the founding fathers of the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies at the University of Birmingham, they tried to analyze why so many people were not represented. Because we, as I mentioned earlier, we have only the vision of the white male heterosexual and with moral absolutes. So cultural studies, we could say that it's a convergence among different other fields. For example, anthropology, that we already said that the concept of culture comes from anthropology, literature, linguistics, sociology, films, and journalism. Why do you think they have in common? What do they have in common? What happened with literature, for example? Have you ever read in literature Charles Dickens? Yes. Well, in certain aspects, some of the books, Tom Sawyer perhaps, they are trying to represent specific situations that were happening in a specific context. Okay? The same happened with linguistics. I bet that you have a lot of linguistics, the ones that are studying in the program. Perhaps you remember Ferdinand de Saussure. What's the difference between signifier and signified? That's a lot. That's also related to cultural studies. Okay, so what does cultural studies study? Good question. Culture, power, representation is equal to cultural studies. So we can say that what is at stake in cultural studies is the connection it seeks to make to matters of power and cultural politics. That is, to an exploration of representation of and for marginalized social groups. This is a definition provided by Barker, that is a very nice author related to cultural studies. So as you can see, the main aim of cultural studies is to look for the people that were not represented in order to raise voice. Some people have asked me before, so what is the contribution of cultural studies? More than everything is raising awareness that there are subordination from hegemonic groups, and the idea is that we have to raise new research, papers, articles in order to let people know that we don't have to be subordinated. Okay, so when we are talking about subordination, marginalized groups, we have to consider the following concepts: class, gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, and nation. Why do you think class is one of the aspects that cultural studies try to come up with some ideas? Okay, that's very good. Also, the poor people, marginalized people in general. What about gender? Feminism nowadays is very popular. Patriarchism. Women versus men. What about sexuality? Who represents gay, lesbians, heterosexuals, and in general, transsexuals? What about race? Black people. Ethnicity. Some people get misconfused race with ethnicity, but when we are talking about race, this is more or less related to pigmentation. When we talk about ethnicity, this is related to cultural aspects of certain groups of people. What about nation? Probably you have heard the concept that we have United States, Europe, and the rest of the world. Okay? We're Latino. What are you? You're Latino. Okay? Afro-American. You are not American, you're Afro-American. So those are concepts that the idea of cultural studies is to raise awareness, to write new articles in order to make people know that we don't have to be subordinated. So I'm going to ask for help with some friends that are here, some outstanding speakers that are coming later. When we talk about cultural studies, we also have some other concepts that are closely related to this. These are ideology, identity, and hegemony. I don't know if you can help me with this, Lily? No, you can read? Don't worry. Don't worry, it's okay. Is it okay? Ideology, please. The microphone is coming.
Okay. Maps of meaning that while they purport to be universal truth or historically are historically specific understandings that obscure and maintain power.
So as you can see, ideology has a big concept. Gonzalo, can you help me with the concept of hegemony, please? Sorry for the pictures. Low quality, marginalized, low culture.
Hegemony, the process of
Maintaining
and reproducing ascendant meanings and practices. It implies a situation where an historic bloc of powerful groups exercises social authority and leadership over subordinate groups through the winning of
consent. So as you can see, this is a big issue here. Probably you have heard about, no, I guess that you don't know Noam Chomsky.
Yes.
Well, Noam Chomsky, besides of being a linguist, is also a philosopher. And I really advise you to get some readings related to hegemony and the hegemony that the United States has nowadays. That's we are speaking this language, by the way. Okay? So, as you can see, ideology and hegemony obscure our own identities. So, this is my personal point of view in this case. My invitation, even though I haven't finished with my presentation yet, is to keep your identities. Don't pretend to be British. Don't pretend to be American because we are Chilean. Chilean people that speak English as a foreign language or as a second language. But that's my invitation, to keep our culture. Okay, so how do we analyze culture? We can analyze culture through cultural text. What is a cultural text? Cultural text is the production of consent that implies popular identification with cultural meanings, generated by signifying practices of hegemonic text. What can be a cultural text? Images, sounds, objects, and activities in general. Okay, so I will ask you to talk with a partner now in order to analyze some pictures from a cultural perspective. I want you to try to look beyond, to read between the lines what is behind this picture, because as you can see, this is a cultural text. So now please get together with a partner and discuss for a minute. What can you see through this picture? Only 1 minute. Okay.
If you look at it from the Chilean perspective, you don't care because, first of all, Sam is not a figure for us. It's a character. The message is we don't care because we are not in the army. And yeah, but also if we look at it from the Chilean way, we are very contrarian to the army. And it's un chileno es estar en contra del ejército, no ser parte del ejército, que ser el único partido. Todo ese tipo de cosas. ¿Ya? Entonces nuestra prueba siempre ha sido muy antiguerra.
Hey girls, you can invite Matt in order to involve in the conversation. Please, it's too isolated there. Oh, Matt. Okay, I think that is enough. Is there a couple that wants to share any insights from this cultural text? And the microphone over there, anyone from the side? I want everybody to participate. Remember that you are going to be teachers, and teachers have to be very active. Oh yeah. There we go.
Hi, hello. So we have discussed here, and we think that the picture represents basically nationality and strength from what we can see from here, what it basically it shows.
Okay, that's very good. Anyone else? Okay, Mr.
The image in particular of Uncle Sam is a product, obviously, of American patriotism during World War II. And if you can actually look into the details, we know that in the US segregation was an issue back then, and obviously that's why the caricature obviously is white, has facial features that resemble both George Washington and Lincoln.
Yeah.
So it's a familiar face to those who are watching it, and also it supports the sentiment of being against totalitarianism, of being pro-liberty, which was the main reason why the US was fighting in World War II.
Yeah, that's great. So as you can see from the very beginning, always United States related to the army. Someone else? That's the idea. That's the idea. Don't worry. That's the idea. That's the idea. Yeah. I remember through history, when you remember the Roman Empire, you said, oh, the Romans, but most of them weren't Romans. The same with the people that went to the wars in the United States. Most of them were Latinos in order to get the certificate to be citizens of the United States. So here we have, well, that's the idea of cultural text, to read between the lines and go beyond. Here we have a different pictures. Again, 1 more minute. I want you to participate. I think that you are too quiet. It's your week, I guess, or not? So you have to be more active. I invite you to be more active. Don't be sleepy. I have plenty of pictures, so we can spend the whole day analyzing pictures. Okay, 30 seconds, I guess that is enough. So, do you want to share any idea at the back there, please? Yeah. Come on.
Hello everyone.
Hello.
Well, definitely the eagle is a symbol of power. So that means that the US is powerful. And especially now that we are all talking in English, that means that the US is powerful nowadays.
Let's turn to Mapudungun. Mapuzungun? What's the real name?
Yeah, Mapuzungun.
Okay.
What do you say about that? I didn't get it.
Know that we should turn into our own native language.
Well, definitely we should keep our identity
Yeah,
as Chilean
that's
people.
great. Yeah, the eagle represents power, freedom. What else? Anybody from this side? Yeah, Mister, please. Or I will share this with you. Ah, yeah, okay. You get the point. You get the point.
So,
5 more extra points for the students there.
so more likely they cannot be hunted and they can hunt anything.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's perfect. So here we have another picture. I love this picture. What can you read between the lines? Hollywood. Most of the films in Hollywood. Always. Oh, okay, Mister.
Where's the mic? Oh, whatever. No microphone. So,
Okay, go.
the
Don't
Statue
worry.
of Liberty being an icon, obviously, of liberty, the
Yeah.
fact that it's still raising up its fist despite whatever circumstance, because that's a classic film, image in film. The Statue of Liberty, despite everything that's happening,
With
still
hands.
still up, still handed up, because it's the torch, it's the sign of liberty that would never die in the US.
Yeah, so as you can see, you get from one picture you can write 24 pages. Let's turn to the UK. Britannia, Lady Britannia. What does this picture represent? What can you read from this cultural text?
Well,
Anybody else?
anybody else?
Anybody else? Do we have only one student in here?
Whoa, that's awesome. So, obviously Britannia is usually represented as a woman. Obviously always white, never in different skin color.
Just pretty.
Yes. And the other main factor is the globes. The globes is usually, obviously, a circle. So in order to see it completely in a 2D perspective, you have to split it in half and show both. And it shows that Britannia rules everything. They have control over
The
everything.
British
on the planet.
Empire,
Yes.
18th century. What about this one? One king, one flag, one fleet, one empire. Are we product of that empire? Are we teachers of English? Why are not we studying French, Portuguese? From this side, anybody? The ladies at back. Would you like to share with us? No? Come on, don't be shy. Mister, okay. Do you need the micro? Okay.
Maybe because in Portugal and France, both monarchies didn't last really long, honestly. All Portuguese royals died, and we know what
Right?
happened.
Or they kill them.
They killed each other.
Why?
The throne.
Yeah.
And we know what happens to France. But in England, it's actually really confusing, if I can be honest. At one point, they killed their king, and 2 years after, they put another one.
Yeah.
But they could get a hold of the world for a very long time.
It is said that the British Empire is the biggest empire on earth until now.
Yeah, if we count India, Africa.
Yeah. So, but I would like you to focus on the picture. Can you see that, for example, they are kind of worshipping Britannia?
Yeah, I see that because for quite a while they had to worship the queen or the king.
Yeah.
Because the king actually, we have to think about the fact that the queen was crowned as Empress of India at one point. This meant they were naming themselves as one of the biggest empires in the world. They were getting a hold of a lot of resources
mine.
from India, Africa.
Coffee, tea time.
A lot of tea, also the fact that they could get a hold of opium in China.
Well, they get resources from every place. So let's move. What about this picture? What about this cultural text? What can we get from this cultural text?
I would like to point out first that the photo was staged. After the earthquake, it was not an instant moment. The person found the flag, then told the person, get the camera, we're going to take this picture. But the picture itself represents the spirit of the Chilean, that despite every situation that we are facing, we are able to still stand up and keep on fighting.
Even though I love it. I love it. Well, actually, I was a student like you when the earthquake took place, and I love this picture. I feel very represented by this. We are marginalized, so we feel represented. Let's continue. What about La Cueca? Is this a signifying practice for us? Do we feel represented by Cueca? Do you know how to dance Cueca?
Yes.
Please. Be my guest, please. No. Not that Cueca.
That is a postcard cueca.
Yeah, that's right.
Cueca is,
La Cueca Chora.
yeah, I mean, no, whatever cueca, but
That's just for the picture.
People don't dress like that in the country. People who really dance cueca whatever clothes you're wearing. I mean,
I remember
I
that.
dance cueca everywhere. I'm very good at it, and I don't wear. I never wear it.
That's great.
Because it's not really the dress.
Yeah.
Now it's becoming kind of a flamenco kind of dress.
Yeah. So as you can see, you are focusing on the dressing, but some other people in previous presentations related to this has told me, Profe, I remember that there is a situation with the chicken, with the goose and everything that were. So, but it's the way that you interpret the text, because this is culture, by the way. Let's move on. Is this a cultural text or not? Yes, it is. Well, I vote for you. Sorry, I made a mistake. I have to assume that. So, as you can see, estamos bien en el refugio no 33. Is this a cultural text? Yes. What does it represent? Again, how to overcome the situation on the hands of the president. Okay? So, in order to continue and to emphasize something that I mentioned earlier, sometimes what is marginalized becomes mainstream. If you go back in time, you can remember that the jeans at the beginning were used for social working classes. But nowadays, you see models and many people from high culture wearing jeans. What about Christendom or Christianity? Since the fall of the Roman Empire, Christendom or Christianity shaped Western world. But nowadays, some people, if you ask them, are you into religion? Yes, but I don't go too much to church. Because it's becoming marginalized. And what is becoming mainstream? LGBTIQ. What is the meaning for L? G, B, T, I, intersexual, Y, queer. So as you can see, this is cyclical. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes what is marginalized becomes mainstream, what is mainstream becomes marginalized. I'm not going to get deep into this topic of the methodologies, but some of the methodologies for analyzing cultural texts include structuralism, post-structuralism, discourse analysis. This would take a whole module to analyze this, but I'm going to present you with some of the authors. You already know Ferdinand Saussure, Claude Lévi-Strauss, Michel Foucault, Roland Barthes, and finally Jacques Derrida, that he came up with the idea of deconstruction of the text, cultural text. Okay, as the title of this presentation is An Experience or a Journey Through American and Cultural Studies, I will share with you that in order to pass the diplomado or certificate, I had to write an article, and I never thought that I would spend 24, 27 pages only by analyzing one artwork, a fragment from some lyrics, and the way that these people sing. First of all, I have to say that I'm not into death metal. I'm not into death metal at all. But for me, it was very interesting to analyze why this musical genre is still alive instead of pop music and some other genres. So the title of this article was Death Metal Music for Everybody and Nobody. But what can you see from this cultural text? Does it represent something? Yes, it is. This demon represents Moses. What he has on his hand represents the tables of the law, and it's supposed that everything is the paradise. But how do metalheads feel represented with this? They rise as a counter-hegemonic force in order to show up people that the Christianity and the right-wing politicians were hypocritical, and that's why they everything turn it to themselves and use it in a different way. That's why, for example, this is a kind of satire from the Bible. And for example, if you go, have you ever heard that metal, by the way?
Yes.
They sing guttural voices, growls like lions or animals in general. But if you go back to religion, how do religious people sing? In a harmonious way with lyrics. So this is a kind of counter-hegemonic force in order to show that they weren't represented by Christendom, by the right-wing politicians, by conservatives, and so on. In order to pass the British Cultural Studies, I have to write a playwright, again analyzing a cultural text. The title of it's beautiful, I love it. Sorry, but I spent a whole semester writing and editing and drafting and everything related to this piece of writing that's called Sanctus Ignis, and of course is a playwright based on certain historical aspects from the 16th century, where the people was understood as saints or sinners, or there was another concept that was called the understanding of being, that was God at the top, then the angels, then the hymn, then the Pope, and everything else. But these are not published yet, but they are going to be published by the Universidad de Chile, I guess that at the end of the year. And the big question is it possible to get culture into your classrooms? Do you think it is possible to bring cultural studies to your classrooms? Yes, of course. It is very possible. When I decided to take this diplomados was because I was involved in a lot of methodology courses that were more or less the same, every year the same, communicative language teaching. Okay guys, today I'm going to talk to you about the communicative language teaching. The students were, no, teacher. So I noticed that there was a gap, and a good way to approach this gap was get into culture in order to get them to understand from a critical perspective, from a what's the name of this? Reflective perspective. How do the Americans or the British think about life? How do they feel identified? What concepts? What are their values that they share? And finally, sorry, but it's supposed that it was coming my master, but he couldn't come. And he asked me to advise you that there are some programs, American Cultural Studies by Universidad de Chile, the same as British Cultural Studies. And this year it started the Chilean Studies that is related to culture as well. And many people, foreigner people in Santiago, are taking this course in order to understand our way of thinking. How do we feel represented? In order to finish with the presentation, I would like to point out that cultural studies is not the same about the study of culture. Cultural studies concerned with the cultural change, rising awareness. Okay, thank you for your participation. Thank you. I don't know if you have any question about this. Please, be my guest.
Thank you for Professor Francisco to give this presentation. And from the perspective of TESOL, and I do really agree that, so you were talking about British and American culture, and well, apparently we're now sitting here speaking English, so we have to admit, like, think about why we're speaking English, why everyone wants to, speak English well, is because we have to meet, because United States, or they are the really economic giant, because the strength is that the cultural output really get influenced by the country itself. So I think that's our educators' responsibility when we bring this idea into the classroom. I mean, at the meantime, we try to connect to the world. Also, we need to protect our own culture, to recognize our own identity. So that's what I want to. It's a challenge for our educators, like, because especially now the globalization, like you have immigrants, refugees comes to the classroom with different backgrounds. So I think it's a challenge, but we really need to prepare for that when we conduct a class in the classroom. And also, I have a question regarding to the presentation. Is when we talk about the low culture, actually, this is my second year in Chile, and where I learned a lot of Chilean music, Chilean, culture, slangs from the street, from my neighbors, not from the institute, opera.
Can you share
like
some
that.
of them?
Well, maybe I can, after the presentation we can go to a park or something. But my question is, now, for example, South America, well, specifically China and Chile is building a closer relationship. So how can we, because the cultures from the street or from, private or like individual musicians, it's not easy they don't have they don't have a big stage to show their talents, and it's even harder to protect the valuable culture from the nation. So, and I was thinking in this perspective, what can we do as a Chilean or as, I don't know, a citizen from China to show to this valuable culture, the low culture, to a bigger stage, like a world stage?
Well, I think that your question is amazing. First of all, because probably not many of you know PIAC program or English Open Doors program. They already have certain programs related to Chinese culture too. They are doing internships, I guess, with some students. Last year, there were some students from Munchen, that is a small city or a small town near my city, Los Angeles, that were took to China. Okay. Also, there is an institute that's called Confucio, I guess, that is becoming very popular. On the other hand, my invitation would be, my dear friend, if the culture doesn't go to you, you have to go to the culture. Offer to schools talks, offer to schools, offer to universities certain aspects about your culture, offer free workshops, because sometimes it's difficult, but it's our duty to go there and show what we have to show. That would be my answer.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess that I have something else. No. I guess that in a way I'm going to answer this going back in time with Gonzalo, that is over here. Sometimes the school didn't give us enough money, and in Los Angeles, a small city. So you have to go there. I have to take my students to there in order to show them what is culture, what is the perspective from a British guy in this case. So sometimes if you don't have the chance, you have to go and look for it. Before coming to this seminar, last week I had a presentation for a vulnerable school about British culture. And I wasn't paid, but I didn't mind to be paid. What I wanted to do is to show what is culture about. So that would be my invitation, and if you want to go to Ayep again, because you have been already there, and if you want to go to Senami, where the other place where I work, you are cordially invited, so you can show us what is your culture about. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
We thank Mr. Francisco Salamanca for being with us today. Now, Mr. Gonzalo Castel, member of our Students' Council, will proceed to thank Mr. Salamanca by giving him a question. Now, You are cordially invited to enjoy a coffee break right outside the auditorium before we continue with the next session.
Yo trabajo aquí, pues, uno videollamada por todos lados.
Por todas partes.
I haven't spoken to you in months. Don't you want to say something to your son about something?
Oye, congrats. Did you focus on the question?
Yes,
you did.
I
yes,
did.
You did.
Obviously, I did.
I know. There's something there.